Hey listeners, this is a rerun, or as I like to call it, a TAC Reload preamble. You might be hearing more of these. And I'm just going to be real with you. I've been doing this podcast for a lot of years. I've been doing it full time for about 2. I was hoping to grow it into a full-time income. I said I'd give it a year, and I've given it 2. I've cashed out retirement accounts. I've cashed out Bitcoin. Lived off of savings while trying to grow the podcast, and it has grown by God's grace by leaps and bounds, but it has not yet become a full-time income. There's a time to spend and a time to save, Ecclesiastes says. So I will be taking on some private contracting work, have gun, will travel, which means, especially by God's grace, pretty soon I'll be entering in some pretty strenuous training as far as the schedule goes, so you're probably going to get some more reruns. If you don't go back and listen to old episodes, maybe they'll be new to you. But I just wanted to give you a heads up and be real with you as to what's going on. As Ecclesiastes says, there's a time to spend and a time to save. Hopefully we'll build back up some savings and still be able to get out a podcast pretty regularly. I've been doing about a podcast a day for a long time. A lot of podcasts only do a podcast a week. So hopefully you will bear with me. I will try and get the patrons more special insider-only content as they get already. I don't want to leave them out to dry. They're the ones that step up and support the podcast, and I really hope that they feel they're getting their money's worth. But if not, no hard feelings. I will try and keep up on the Patreon stuff, but you guys may see a little bit of a drop-off, at least periodically, depending on schedule, on new episodes. You'll still get new episodes, maybe just not one a day. So enjoy this Tactical Reload episode. Well, hello there, gunfighters. Part 3 of truck guns. The P.D.W., the personal defense weapons. Now, I'm going to be honest, I thought about talking about this today because I thought it would be a simple one. I'd knock it out. As last night, you ever have one of those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't go back to sleep for a while? That was me. So I got up this morning, I was pretty tired. And I thought, P.D.W.s, that'll be the one in the series I knock out because they're pretty simple. And then I actually started thinking about it quite a bit and getting prepared for the show. And it's not simple. It's not even simple to define. So, we're going to tackle that. Again, this is part 3. So, if you're not subscribed following the show, locate Close With and do a tactical assault on that follow button, subscribe button, whatever it is. Make sure you're being updated on the series. With that, let's move into the P.D.W. here on Gunfighter Life, making godly men strong and strong men godly, where we talk about guns and gunfighting the right way with God at the center, Judeo-Christian values, and real-world first-hand experience. No bio today because it's a part 3. Hopefully this is not the only one you've listened to. But if so, welcome. Okay, the personal defense weapon. Let us wax philosophical and do a deep dive. Maybe grab a cup of coffee. We'll sit down and reach into this ether, this ethereal realm that is the P.D.W. What is a P.D.W.? Again, not even easy to define. Personal defense weapon doesn't really help us because, most of the things we're going to talk about in the truck gun series and a lot of the guns that exist are personal defense weapons. But the way I think makes the most sense to define it is a weapon that is more capable than even a good full-size combat handgun, but less powerful or less effective depending on how you'd quantify that on a battlefield. It's not as capable as one of the go-to assault weapons of our day, the 2 de facto ones being the Ak-47 and the M4, or ish, or even larger than that. But it would be somewhere in between those two. And that's a broad spectrum, and inside that spectrum of more capable and powerful or effective, and there's a lot of ways to quantify that, than the combat handgun, but less so than your go-to intermediate caliber carbine assault rifle, and geared towards personal defense. Now, I think to get a grasp on this, let's look back in days of yore. What are some of the classic P.D.W.s? Some real classic ones I can think of. Going back to the very inception of practical, military policing role semi-automatic handguns, there is this P.D.W. emergence. You see the Mauser broom handle with a stock. What is that if not a P.D.W.? To be more effective than the regular handgun. Looking at the Luger or the Snellfoil, like artillery Lugers with the stock. Again, what is that if not trying to give you more capability as a personal defense weapon than just a handgun? Just a little bit later in this, the Browning High Power, which is a good gun even today, stands the test of time, with I think a tangent sight, some kind of raised sight out to much longer distances than you would consider a conventional handgun, with a stock. What is that if not a P.D.W.? Now, this is not meant to be a history podcast, and I'm sure there was a stocked handgun before that, maybe a cap and ball revolver. I'm not really sure. But we see from almost the very beginning of practical smokeless powder repeating handguns, this, I want a little bit more. This, I want to give it more capability than a handgun. Well, that hasn't gone away. There are gunfighters. We still have that today with modern handguns. There are stocks for Glocks. There are the Roni conversion kits, which I said in earlier episodes that we would get to. And those kind of bridge the gambit from a pretty simple stocked handgun to trying to turn it into a carbine or a carbine conversion. But I think is where we're going to start today. I think these absolutely can increase the firepower over a traditional handgun. Okay, and for this, what we need to do is take all the tax stamp stuff, lick the tax stamps, stick them somewhere, and put them proverbially on the table for a while, because we need to do this thought experiment as if those didn't exist, and then we'll bring them back into reality because they do exist for us. But if they weren't an NFA item, so you take the handgun and you put some kind of stock on it, whether it's a pistol brace or a wire stock or a fixed stock or a fold-out stock, right? And you do that. Why? Because it's not all benefits. You're making the gun bigger and heavier. There's an obvious reason we don't do this on most handguns, right? For CCW. There's an obvious reason for that. But if it's not a CCW gun, if you're not trying to conceal it or carry it on a duty belt, as in a cop, or open carry it, even that will get a bit kludgy. Say you're having it slung across your chest, which is common for EP rolls and convoy operations and things like that. Or it's going to be in a bailout bag, or beside your center console, or in your center console. And it can be bigger and bulkier than a traditional handgun. So that's not that big a drawback to you. What do you get? Well, you get the third point of contact, as in not just your hands, but it's pressed into your body. Most people are far more accurate and increases the shootability and the range, even if you're not putting a longer barrel or changing the projectile on the handgun. Most people will shoot that better to a more effective range than they can just a regular handgun. And that's a big deal. There are different ways to do this, but some of these conversions have the ability to mount an optic, and you'd say big deal. Most modern handguns right now, at least the popular ones, will give you the ability to mount a red dot. But there's issues with those reciprocating on the slide. You can, I would argue, get better and a wider array of optics if you go to one of these conversions. That's one of the benefits of it. Also, I know you can get extended mags. I know you can throw a 33 round Glock mag in your, Glock 19, but they don't handle really well with that big, ungainly kind of pendulum swinging off the bottom. With that third point of contact, although technically doesn't increase your capacity over a handgun, it increases the effective capacity. You're probably not running around with a 33 round stick mag in your Glock 19 unless it's for some Instagram picture. But with one of these P.D.W. things, turning your handgun into a quasi super handgun, you get those benefits. So I would say this does fit into our P.D.W. philosophy for truck guns. There's a lot of merit here. Alright, now let's peel off those tax stamps and put them back in reality here. Okay, you got to deal with NFA items. Not only do you have to pay the $200 and get all the things, but if it's a vehicle and your vehicle crosses state lines, that's an issue with these NFA items. So, yeah. But they are a thing. They do increase your firepower over just a regular handgun. Especially if you're talking about in a bag, in the center console, under the seat, whatever it is. But you have to deal with the tax stamp. The other limitation is these are generally going to be in a traditional pistol caliber. Some designs you may switch out the barrel and get a longer barrel, but on many you're getting the same ballistics as a handgun, which are not great. Also benefit if you're using one of these that takes the same magazines as your concealed carry gun, because I think your truck gun should be in addition to your good EDC, not replacing it, not supplanting it, but in addition to, you can get that cross magazine, cross caliber compatibility. Now, let us look at what I think is another really clear historical example of the P.D.W. And you may not think of it that way, but I absolutely think that it is a P.D.W., an OG, an old school P.D.W., the M1 carbine. They're fantastic, light, handy little carbines. Maybe not super reliable with those really old mags by today's standards, but for the time, a really, really good and really, really popular mass-produced P.D.W. These were never meant as a frontline infantry weapon. These were never meant to replace the M1 Garand. But they were for, let's say, more rear echelon troops. And who wanted a little bit more firepower than the 1911. And I would say, as much as I like the 1911, these absolutely are more firepower than a 1911. Look at the ballistics of an M1 carbine. Better ballistics than a 357 Magnum. It's not an intermediate cartridge in the realm of like a 7.62x39, but it is certainly intermediate in that it is more powerful than most common handgun rounds. The M1 carbine. It's also super light and handy. I want to say it weighs 5 and something pounds. Super light, super handy, easy to control, easy to train on. You can get good hits with them out to 300 yards. That's quite a step up in performance over most handguns. So you get a light, handy little long gun that is less effective than the major issue battlefield rifle, but certainly more effective than a handgun. And I'd say this is the one that probably stood the test of time. If you can find a reliable one, and the thing is they're highly collectible now, but if you can get one with mixed match serial numbers or one that has been Bubba-ized or somebody tried and poorly refinished the stock or something like that where it's just as good and just as shootable, but maybe doesn't have the collector value, M1 carbine wouldn't be a bad truck gun. It's certainly battle proven. What do we have more modern in this same kind of genre? Well, I would argue a modern one that was designed much like the M1 to be a PDW, the M1 carbine, I mean, the PS90. Now, I'm not going to talk about a lot of other bullpups in this episode. I might get to them later. But a lot of the bullpups are meant to be a replacement for an infantry weapon. The PS90 was meant to be a PDW. Convoy operations, clandestine operations, rear echelon troops that wanted something and more firepower than a handgun, but not as big and bulky or nearly as powerful as a frontline infantry weapon. Again, you got to lick the tax stamps and stick them up somewhere. The PS90, or the P90, I guess, the P90 is legit. An actual P90 with the actual original size barrel and in full auto, that thing can rock and roll. That thing is absolutely, I think, what they set out to be. A really, really good PDW. Okay, now peel off the tax stamps. You can't have it. You can't have it. Light, handy, lightweight ammo, full auto, 50-round magazines. I would argue more capable, longer range, better armor piercing than most handguns. However, can't have the armor piercing ammo, and I say can't, it's not easily available. Also, you can't have the short barrel because then it's an NFA item, and then you can't have full auto. And I don't think I think this one is actual can't unless you're part of a government organization or have some kind of license, because I don't think there are any transferable ones because they came out in the 90s, which is post when you had to have machine guns on the registry. If you don't know, in America, it is illegal to own a machine gun, but you have to get ones that were grandfathered in. They're kind of crazy expensive, and I don't think they even exist in the P90 as far as a private transferable one. So what are you left with? You're left with shoving a big, long barrel, much longer, I think, than is ideal for this weapon on there. And this is one of the few bullpups where even if you do that, even if you give it a 16-inch barrel, you might argue it's still pretty light and handy, and it is. That's why I'm including it. And it's far less effective. I'm not a big fan of full auto for most things, but for this PDW and that light recoiling cartridge, a big part of the appeal is the full auto. You lose that. I'm not saying it's a bad choice if you go to the PS90. Maybe you want to get a tax stamp and get the short barrel and just rock with your P90 or PS90. Or maybe you want to go with the 16-inch barrel. But that's a legit PDW, especially if you look at it in its original form for its original function as a PDW. I think they set out to achieve that goal and they did it very well. Okay. Now let's look at taking real common, especially here in America, America's rifle. I know that's not what it stands for, but the AR-15. And we make it even shorter and smaller. Okay, lick the back of the tax stamp, stick it up for a second. This was really nice when you had the pistol brace option. It was really nice. It made a lot of sense. It made a lot of sense for a PDW. You lose some ballistics when you go cutting down a barrel. You lose ballistics when you go from the regular full-length rifle, the M16A1 or A2 or A4, to the M4. You lose ballistic capability. It is less powerful round for round than with the 20-inch barrel. You lose even more when you cut it down. And I know some of you are just itching to, you're like wanting to tell me 300 blackout, we'll get there. 300 blackout, we'll get there. But you stick with the 5.56 and you cut it down and you lose some of those ballistics. But you still get pretty decent ballistics, in my opinion, if you're talking about a 12.5, 11.5-inch barrel in that range. Certainly more effective than most handguns, so it's still in there. And when you had the pistol brace option, it was sweet. No tax stamp, you could drive across state lines. A really good truck gun PDW option. And then it went away. Sad day. Take a deep breath. Take the tax stamps back off the wall and bring them back into reality. Now you don't have that option. Well, because of the way the AR operates, as opposed to like an AK, It needs that buffer tube. One of the things I actually don't like about the design, but one of the things that helps us here, because the ATF said, well, you can use it with just a buffer tube. Well, the buffer tube is not a great stock, but it's still a third point of contact, and it still works better than just a handgun. So you could have it and put on, let's say, an M16A1 buffer tube and just use it like that. It's not great, but it's still going to be more effective than a handgun. And I think you get to the point where you're kind of releasing a flashbang on yourself with noise and concussion when you get below a certain barrel length and you lose a lot of ballistic. So I'm going to say in this, you lose more than you gain if you go below, let's say 12.5, 11.5, certainly 10.5. I wouldn't go any shorter than that unless you just want to have fun and be obnoxious at an indoor range. I think it's already short enough at the 10, 11, 12-inch barrel. That's kind of a sweet spot. It's still, again, less effective than the rifle and the M4 carbine, but much more than most handguns. Also, you're talking about your standard 30-round magazines. You get more capacity, available, affordable ammo. There's a lot going for this option. Okay, let's talk about 300 Blackout. In general, I am not a fan of 300 Blackout. I've never owned a 300 Blackout. I'm familiar with them. I see very little point in them with a traditional, let's say, carbine. They're a niche application. Talk about the subsonic ammo, and I know this is not apples to apples, but in my mind, you're talking a 220 grain bullet at just under the speed of sound. I know it depends on air pressure and elevation and ambient temperature and humidity and all that, but let's, for argument's sake, for round numbers, call the speed of sound 1,000 feet a second. It's give or take right in that ballpark. You're talking a 220 grain bullet at 900 and something feet a second. Well, to me, that's a 45 ACP. A 45 ACP is a 230 grain at 900 and something feet a second. And again, we're doing this to be more effective than a handgun. And you get some other benefits, but if I'm talking about a full-length gun, and I know you're saying, well, you can shoot the 110 grain. I think in a regular carbine, there's better options. However, the 300 Blackout, if you're talking about this P.D.W. world, if you're talking about going the Obrez route, which is a Russian term they use to cut down rifles. If you don't know, Obrez means circumcised, which is pretty funny when you think about your chopping the barrel. But if you want to Obrez it and cut it down, you see some advantage in the 300 Blackout. Because the 300 Blackout, because of the nature of physics, and I don't want to nerd out on cross-section of the barrel and pressures and all this stuff, but for reasons, it does better in shorter barrels. So in this case, you may decide for this buffer tube, third point of contact, short, quasi, not carbine, not pistol thing, P.D.W. platypus, we're going to call it, the 300 Blackout makes sense. And I'd say of all the places where I would concede that maybe a 300 Blackout, I would concede maybe here the 300 Blackout makes sense. And I think that will make one of the patrons very happy, who is a big advocate. I guess cheerleader is unisex because George Bush was a cheerleader. So, yeah, he's a cheerleader for this round. So I think he'll like that. I think of all the places it makes sense, if you want to go with a short barrel, even shorter than 10-inch, but 7-inch, 9-inch, quasi, platypus, rifle, pistol thing, and you want to rock it in 300 Blackout, there you go. I think perhaps one of the best options for the P.D.W. realm, and I'm not saying the P.D.W. realm is the best realm for a truck gun, but short, light, handy, and you could put it under a seat. You could slip it. A lot of the driver seats in the back, they have that big pocket. You could slip it back there with a single point sling wrapped around, so you could literally just grab it and pull it into the front seat. They're small enough that you could, if you went to a higher threat level, like a color code orange, if you know your Jeff Cooper color codes, if you're going to a higher color code, you got civil unrest going on, you got mass crime afoot, you can rock that thing on your chest. Even rock it on your chest with a pretty big jacket, and it's, again, certainly more firepower than a regular handgun. Although the buffer tube as a third point of contact is not ideal, it, coupled with a single point sling, you can you can make stuff happen with it if you want. So that makes a lot of sense here. Okay, the other option, and we already did pistol caliber carbines, but in general, for legal carbine, it's a 16-inch barrel. If we look at a historic, that's better English there. A historic example, not quite as old as the M1 carbine, but pretty old school at this point. We're talking the MP5. Iconic 80s action movie star. An action movie star in the gun world as big as Arnold Schwarzenegger in the people world. The MP5. The MP5 is a fantastic design. The fluted chamber gives you good accuracy. It's a closed bolt design, which I won't get into, but it's a really good design. It's an accurate design. It's a smooth recoiling design. It is really good with its short barrel and its full auto. But sadly, those stamp things again, which means you can't have that, which means if you're going to rock it in any kind of quasi PDW realm, you're probably, since the pistol brace thing again went away, you're probably going to rock it with a single point sling, which is okay. If I'm choosing, and I like the MP5, if I'm choosing between the MP5 with no kind of stock and a single point sling doing like the push out technique and an AR platypus thing with a third point of contact in the buffer tube, I'm going to take the buffer tube. I like a third point of contact. I like that. It's not as good as a regular stock, but I think it's better than pushing out on the single point sling. I know there are techniques to do it. I'm familiar with rocking a single point sling. I'm familiar with the MP5. I just think out of those two options, I'm going to go the other route. If you want to go the HK MP5 or civilian version SP5, then go for it. Rock it. You also lose the full auto, though, which is a big part of the effectiveness, much like the PS90, because you're still talking 9mm, you're talking out of a slightly longer barrel than a traditional pistol. There are different versions of the MP5. For this, I'd be talking about the smaller one for the P.D.W. If you want to go the tax stamp route and not cross state lines, then there you go for a P.D.W. But it was designed for that, and you're losing the full auto capability, though, and the full auto capability is a big reason why these things are very popular in certain circles. And I worked more specialized assignments in law enforcement, very familiar and have quite a lot of experience as a private contractor and in the executive protection realm. There's a reason these things are popular, but a lot of that reason is the full auto, which sadly most of us as civilians, let's just say, not on the table for most of us. Again, for most other bullpups, they are generally meant to replace for an army, for an infantry, a mainline battlefield weapon. So I don't think they belong here in the P.D.W. We might get to those in a future episode on the truck gun series. Now, obviously, there are a lot of other models, but I think they fit into one of these kind of genres that we talked about. There's the Chris Vector, but just take what I said about it and apply it like the MP5. Most of the things I said about it will apply to the Chris Vector. Again, a lot of that capability I think has been neutered with the negation of full auto. Or if I didn't talk about the Crinkoff. It's a cool little gun, but it's a tax stamp thing. And whatever I said about the short-barreled AR, you can apply that. You should be able to think critically and apply that to the Crinkoff. Or if I didn't mention your favorite. There is one other kind of genre that I want to talk about because I don't think it really fits in well with the other ones. And that is the CMMG Banshee. CMMG is not a sponsor here. I take no sponsors. If you hear advertisements, by the way that works if you're not hip on the world of podcasting, I have a host. I upload to the host, in my case, Spreaker. Spreaker puts it out in the ether to like Spotify, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Amazon, all those places. They put in the commercials. So anything you hear as a commercial, I have no idea. And it's because I live as a nomad, just getting off on a little bit of a tangent. It depends on where you live. Like I'm here in Alaska, I hear ads about Alaska. When I'm in a place with a large Hispanic population, I hear ads in Spanish. So the ads that I hear when I listen to the podcast are not what you hear when you listen to the podcast. Anyway, I take no sponsors here. CMMG is not a sponsor, but I think they do something really cool here. The CMMG Banshee. Because of the uniqueness, and I mean that in a nice way, normally I'm not a big fan of the buffer tube, but here it helps us out because, again, it's our third point of contact. And because you kind of have it there and you can use it as the buffer tube, not as good as a stock, not as good as a pistol brace, but it's something. CMMG Banshee, I think, is its own kind of little subclass of PDW. Now, there are a lot of AR-based PCCs and sub-caliber things, but many of them use a straight blowback. And that's a simple system and it has its advantages, but it has its disadvantages. And you would be surprised at what these small compact guns recoils like with a straight blowback. It's got a lot of reciprocating mass. And again, without nerding out on physics and dragging Isaac Newton into this, let's just say they have a lot of recoil for their size because you have a lot of reciprocating mass slamming back and forth. The CMMG has a radial, if I'm remembering their terminology correctly, a radial delayed system, which is its own kind of system, not even remotely the same in operation, but kind of similar to the end user in that you get a delayed locking system like the MP5 fluted chamber that lets the pressures drop safely. And you have less reciprocating mass. So you're going to have, in a given platform, if you're trying to compare apples to apples, same weight, same ergonomics and stuff, you should have considerably less felt recoil. Why is that important? When you want to go fast. When you want to drag race with your gun. When you want to go from 0 to 60 real quick. You want to send rounds downrange accurately and well aimed, but at a considerable op tempo, let's call it. That less reciprocating mass, that lower recoil impulse is good, because I don't care how big and manly and how much chest hair you have behind that gun, just the way physics works, if you reduce recoil, you can shoot it the same amount of accuracy faster, as long as you're not waiting on a slow operating system and other things. But the CMMG Banshee is a pretty good thing for that. And here's why I think it's kind of in its own class. I didn't include it in like the MP5 or something like that, is that it has an array of calibers. You can get it in 9mm, wouldn't be a bad choice. You can also get it in 45 ACP, so a modern, much, much lighter Thompson. Because if you've never rocked a Thompson, and I have, the things I had access to in my more specialized assignments, they are a pig. They're a big, heavy girl. The CMMG Banshee is much, much lighter. You can get that in 45 ACP if that's your pet cartridge. You can also get it in 10mm, and you can get it in 5.7. And 5.7 was kind of designed, it was designed to be a PDW cartridge. If you want it in 5.7, you can get it in 5.7. And they all share, there's probably differences in tolerances and geometry, but they all have that radial delayed blowback system. And this is not some Johnny-come-lately thing. They've been around a few years, and they seem to work pretty well. So, I think they should have their own little mention here in their own quasi-subclass in this class that is the PDW, the CMMG Banshee. And again, 5.7, 10mm, 45 ACP, run-of-the-mill 9mm. I think they do a decent job at making them take fairly common magazines, so you have that going for you. And I think in 2023, with the litigious nature of the gun laws and the pistol brace thing and the NFA items stuff going on, this is not one. It's worth considering. I'm not saying it's the best for you in the PDW world. I'm not even saying that PDW is the best truck gun. But I'm saying if you decide the PDW, here are some options. Here are some pros and cons of the different PDWs. Now, let's be circumspect and consider the entire genre of PDW and the similarities that they have here and their pros and cons in the use as a truck gun. Okay. Big pro, in general, they're going to be lightweight. And although you might start out in your vehicle, if you're planning for a possible bug out, you ought to be considering carrying these kind of things on foot. You're a survivalist and a prepper, and I am, and I don't apologize for that. I like continuing to breathe air and put food on the table and protect myself and my wife and those around me as long as God allows that. And I don't want to apologize for that. Most of these are going to be lightweight, handy weapons, which means if you got to carry them on foot, they're going to be lightweight and handy. So if you're trying to cover long distances on foot, you could do a lot worse than a P.D.W. And again, it's a step up in firepower. That's the whole point over a handgun. That's a big pro, because you might say lightweight, but I'm in a car, so I'm not carrying it. But if you have to get out of the car, you are carrying it. Also lightweight, if you're driving, your primary weapon is probably your vehicle. And the primary thing you're doing should probably be driving. But not as easy as a handgun, but a lot of these P.D.W.s can be operated with one hand, if you have to. In a vehicle context, that's a big deal. Also, a vehicle by its very nature is generally a confined space, unless you're talking about rocking the A-Team van and hanging out in the back of it, or you're a schoolie that's armed to the teeth. In general, the very nature of being in a vehicle means you're in a confined space. Since these are light and handy and maneuverable, they'll tend to do pretty well in a confined space. Put that in the advantage box for the P.D.W. Now let's go to the cons category in this Venn diagram. Let's go to the cons circle. They are bigger than a handgun, right? They're all of these we talked about are going to be bigger and heavier than a handgun. So it's not all a free lunch. You want more capability than a handgun, you get more size and weight than a handgun. You get less concealability than a handgun. Also, you get less effectiveness than your go-to assault rifle. And I don't shy away from that term. Hey, I was an assault man in the Marine Corps. They got rid of that MOS. Maybe it wasn't politically correct. Maybe they shouldn't like Marines running around with a bunch of C4. I don't know. But I don't shy away from the term assault. Assault is an action. Assault is not malum in se. It's either good or bad depending on what you're assaulting and what the morals are behind it. But I don't like this Orwellian newspeak where, we're not going to call it an assault rifle, we're going to call it a modern sporting rifle. Well, I'm going to sport my way right into an assault if I have to. So they're less effective than a go-to assault rifle. They're less effective than an AK-47 or an M4 or an M16A4 in general. Case in point, there's no major military today arming its infantry with P.D.W.s. They were by nature designed for more rear echelon troops. Although you might see them in some specialty applications with specialty units, and again, I've done private contracting, I've done quite a bit of EP work, executive protection stuff, VIP stuff. Not because they're more effective, it's because they're more maneuverable and concealable. So they're going to be less effective and less powerful in general round per round. Even if you're talking about the same caliber, even if you're talking about sticking with a 5.56, it's going to be less powerful round per round out of a P.D.W. with a 10-inch barrel than a full-length 20-inch barrel M16. Just is. They're going to be less combat effective than an actual combat-built rifle or carbine. So those are kind of my thoughts on the P.D.W. Again, I thought it was going to be a simple episode, but just the very nature, kind of the ethereal, kind of hard borders definable nature of the P.D.W. made it a complex episode. But hopefully you enjoyed the journey. Hopefully you got some good useful information. If you did, and you want to support, consider becoming a patron. There should be a Patreon link in the show notes. Patrons get all kinds of cool insider content. Consider it like this. Consider if you want access. Have you ever gotten that analysis paralysis? Like you're trying to decide between these two guns or these two calibers and you're looking at it ad nausea. Hey, I've been there. If you want to reach out to somebody with decades of military, law enforcement, private contracting, hunting, and other experience, and you think that's worth $1 for the opportunity to do that, you can become a patron. You can give more than $1, but just for $1. It's not just me in there. We have an insider group where iron sharpens iron. I don't know everything. There's guys that know a lot more about different subjects than I do. But if you think that's worth $1, that being able to ask and get an answer on, I'm really trying to figure this out, and you would like help, consider becoming a patron. Also, if you just want to support the show, the prime directive to make godly men strong and strong men godly, consider becoming a patron. Also, again, like, subscribe, follow the show, leave a review, hit some stars if you want to do that too. With that, let's roll into the tactical tip of the day. I've given this as a tactical tip before, but it's been a minute. I'm in general not a big fan of green tip. I wasn't a big fan of it when I used it in the sandbox, when I was deployed with it. I'm not a big fan of it in general. It's, I think, very poor quality. As far as accuracy goes, it's not really good for terminal performance on soft targets. I don't like it as my go-to ammo. I think it's way overrated. Much like the 300 Blackout, I think in this niche, it makes a lot of sense. Sometimes. I still wouldn't have it as my go-to ammo in my truck gun if you decide your truck gun is going to be a 5.56. However, I think it may be good to have a magazine in addition to your actual loadout of green tip, barrier penetrating ammo. Why? Because it's a truck gun. It's probably likely, if it's a truck gun, that you're going to have to shoot through your vehicle and or into somebody else's vehicle, which includes sheet metal and window glass and dashboards and all that stuff. And for that application, even stopping a vehicle, disabling a vehicle, because vehicle rammings are a thing used in mass casualty incidents just like firearms are. For that, for anti-vehicle stuff, the green tip makes a lot of sense. So if you're going to run a 5.56 platform as your truck gun, you may consider a magazine of the green tip. Still need to test it, make sure it shoots in your acceptable point of aim, point of impact, or know where the holdover or the adjustment is for that. But it's a good thing to have in your proverbial back pocket. My advice, if you're going to do that, take some green tape and mark it, because it just makes sense, right? Green tip, green tape. Or get an actual green magazine. Like, remember when the zombie craze was all the thing? If you can find a green, obnoxious colored magazine, you know it's not your normal go-to defensive ammo. Again, I think for the truck gun application, it makes a lot of sense. That's your tactical tip of the day. Your tactical verse of the day. Tactical verse of the day from Deuteronomy 13. You shall walk after the Lord your God and fear him, and keep his commandments and obey his voice. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. This reminds me of another beautiful verse from God's word. Ecclesiastes. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. You might want to pay attention to this. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God shall bring every work into judgment, with every secret thing, whether it be good or whether it be evil. Thanks for listening, men, and have a blessed day. Truck Guns, Part 4. I think this is the longest series hitherto on gunfighter life. Today we're going to be talking about what here in America is likely the most common truck gun, because it's one of the most common long guns, the intermediate cartridge carbine or rifle. Most commonly here in America, the AR-15. But today's episode is going to include like the AR-15 variants, the AK variants, and some other things. But what's going to characterize today's episode is the intermediate cartridge. Far more powerful than anything we've discussed up to this point on the truck gun series. More than your carry gun, more than your full-size fighting handgun, more than your pistol caliber carbine. Moving up the amount of firepower spectrum. Now, despite what a lot of politicians might have you believe, these black rifles are not particularly powerful in regards to other rifles, but they are more powerful than handguns and PCCs, and they're a good balance of power and shootability. There's a reason they're so prevalent on battlefields today, and have been since kind of lessons learned in World War II, World War I and World War II, and then going into the Cold War. the intermediate cartridge has become a thing. And there's a lot of reason for that. Shootability, portability, the ability to carry lots of ammo. And because of that, especially here in America, economy of scale. That caliber, the 5.56, and we'll talk about other calibers, but the 5.56 and the 7.62 by 39 have become very affordable, very available. The guns, the AR-15, the magazines, right? Even with inflation, especially if you take away inflation, a good AR-15 today is way more affordable than they were in the 80s, in the 90s. Right? Because there are so many, they are so prevalent. They are kind of America's rifle. They may not stand for America's rifle, but they may as well. The AR may as well stand for America's rifle. It's so common here. Even if there were no other good reasons, and there are several which we'll go over, that would be a big reason why it would be probably one of the number one truck guns, even if it wasn't a great choice. Because it's what people have. Just like in days of yore, when I was growing up, it was not uncommon to have somebody with a hunting rifle and a shotgun hanging in the back glass of their truck. That was just a normal thing. Why? Because that's what people had and that's what they used. They were the most common things. Pump shotgun and, let's say, a lever action 30-30 or a bolt action hunting rifle. Those were probably the most common long gun. Well, there's been a shift in urbanization of America, a tacticalization of America, and I'm not against that. I've spent the majority of my adult life as a professional gunfighter, as you know if you listen to the bio. So I'm not against that. I'm just saying that is the most common rifle of today. So for that reason alone, it likely ends up in a lot of vehicles. It's what people have, it's what they shoot, it's what they're familiar with. That intermediate caliber cartridge. But this is a truck gun episode, so I don't want to get off on too many tangents. Let's talk about intermediate caliber rifle/carbines and their advantages or disadvantages as truck guns. Again, they're readily available, they're affordable. There's been a lot of innovation, especially on the AR-15. So easy to mount optics, right? When I went to war in Iraq, Marine Corps Infantry, our first tour for the initial invasion, we had iron-sighted M16A2s. We've come a long way since then. Most ARs that you're going to get today are going to come with a flat top upper, the ability to mount good quality modern optics, which is a good force multiplier. You can still rock the iron sights if you want. I love iron sights. And I think a good rifleman should know how to shoot with iron sights. But an optic is a force multiplier. The ability to easily mount good optics. That's a big deal. That's a lot of innovation. The modularity and even if you're just talking about the, at this point dated quad rail, but was kind of revolutionary for its time, whether it's a quad rail or you're on Team M-Lock or Key Mod or whatever, doesn't really matter as much as marketing hype would have you believe. As long as you can mount a white light on it, and whatever accessories you want, like a sling attachment point, which can literally be a piece of 550 cord, there's a lot of utility there, as opposed to the old, just regular handguards. The free float thing is nice, maybe or maybe not necessary for a truck gun, but the ability to mount a white light and things like that, right? That's a big deal. That's a lot of advantage. There's a lot of utility for a white light in kind of common defensive scenarios with a carbine. And here also for the truck gun. Don't use it to change your tire on the side of the road while it's attached to your gun, but you get a lot of utility with that and the modularity. There's a lot of advantage there. One of the most accessorizable guns. What do they call it? The Barbie for men. That's kind of funny, but the point is you can buy the Barbie Jeep and the Barbie Dream House for your AR. You can go crazy with that thing if you want. I would say there's kind of a temptation to go a little bit too crazy. I think you need a good reliable AR, a good optic, good backup iron sights, a good sling, a good white light, and you're ready to rock and roll. Oh, good magazines, I guess I should mention that. But the ability of them, the ability to have so many good options and good aftermarket options and aftermarket good magazines, even better than the military ones. Unless you're talking about the Marine Corps, switch to the P-Mags, which is pretty awesome. But you get the idea. They're affordable, they're available, they're customizable as far as the AR-15 goes. If you talk about the AK variants, well, what's awesome about these? Well, I don't want to turn this into an episode on the 5.56 versus the 7.62x39. I've done episodes like that, the AR versus the AK. But I think for this application, and in general, if I'm being honest, if I'm looking at the numbers and the data, the 7.62x39 is a better intermediate cartridge, period. It has its disadvantages. It's not as lightweight, right? It's not as high velocity, which does have its own advantages. But I think as far as a best all-around intermediate cartridge, the 7.62x39 is better. You get that with the AK, unless you're getting an AK in some other caliber, but I'm talking most common. You get that 7.62x39. Better barrier penetration, which, again, if it's a truck gun, it's likely that you'll have to shoot out of your vehicle, like through your vehicle, and or into somebody else's vehicle. I think the 7.62x39 is better at that. I think it's a better cartridge for that. It has more mass. Talk about the most common 5.56, 55 grain. If you're talking a little bit heavier, 62 grain. If you're talking about the massive Mark II 62 at 77 grains. Okay, the old school, what the AK has been using for decades and decades and decades, what radical Islamic jihadists have been using to try and kill Christians. You're talking about run-of-the-mill 7.62x39. It's 123 grain, 122, 123 grain. It's a bigger bullet. Bigger bullet, more mass, moderate velocity. That tends to penetrate well. It has its advantages. Again, I think it's a better all-around cartridge for intermediate cartridge. I think it's a better hunting cartridge than 5.56, not than a lot of other cartridges. But we see that here. I think it has some advantages here. You also get the advantage of the AK. The AK, again, is prolific on the battlefields from radical Islamic jihadists trying to cut Christians' heads off with dull knives. It's a world that we live in. Let's not forget that there are people like that. To, sadly, child soldiers in Africa, to people fighting in the Ukraine on both sides, right? The AK is prolific. It's battle-proven. If there ever was a battle-proven firearm, it's the AK-47. From jungles to deserts to... is there an environment that it hasn't served in? Maybe Antarctica? Right? It's a battle-proven weapon. So you get that. Another thing that categorizes this class of weapons, standard, not high capacity, standard magazines are 30 rounds, right? 30 and 30. Might argue the original standard for the M16 was 20 rounds, and I like 20 round mags for a lot of reasons. But either way, high capacity. So you got that going for you. You have a fair amount of firepower. They're very shootable. That's one of the reasons I went to intermediate cartridges as opposed to full powered rifle cartridges. They're more shootable. You get less recoil compared to a full house rifle cartridge like a 30-06 or a 308. Very good balance of firepower versus mobility. If it's doubling as a bug out bag gun, a bug out gun, then yeah, that plays a factor. Also, going back to the AK-47, one of the big disadvantages you might get here is, like it or not, and I don't think it's fair, but I think that it is, and I'm not here to pee on you and tell you that it's raining. I'm here to tell you the truth. Here in America, we see AKs largely as a bad guy gun. And again, it's not fair because AKs are just tools. They're no better or worse evil or good than an AR-15 or your grandpappy's lever action 30-30. But that's the way they're perceived. That's the way the media paints them. That's the color that they're under. That's the ensign that they ride under. Meaning if you have to use one and the men with 10 stars show up, usually the perception is bad guy. That's a bad guy gun. Again, may not be fair, may not be right, but I'm just here to tell you what I think is. Somebody that's served in a lot of different roles, worn a lot of different hats, literally. it's perceived by a lot of people and the general public, I think, as a bad guy gun. So if you're going to go that route, really consider that. You may want to go with an AK that doesn't look like an AK, a Galil Ace. For a long time, I had a Galil Ace pistol back when they were legal, way back in the day, like a year ago, when they were legal, but I had this years before that. A Galil Ace 7.62x39 with a brace. One of the cool things about the AK platform as opposed to the AR platform is the AR platform has a buffer tube. The AK doesn't need a buffer tube, meaning you can fold the stock, and you can get folding stock ARs, but you can't fire them like that. It's pretty handy to have a maneuverable gun like that you can maneuver inside a vehicle and still fire if you have to, that will operate with a folded stock. Galil Ace doesn't really look like an AK, and I doubt many people that aren't gun nuts, if they looked at one, would think it was an AK. But they absolutely are an AK. They're absolutely reliable. They're built very well. That Galil, especially the pistol, is a good, I guess it was a good option when you could get the pistol brace. Now maybe the full size is a better option. But Galil Ace doesn't really look like an AK. So if you want an AK that's really good, rock solid, dependable, made to really good standards, and made by an ally, Israel, you may consider the Galil Ace. In fact, that was one of my truck guns back when I was doing a lot of stuff in government rides. I needed one that would fit into a bag handily, that wouldn't show, that would be in a normal size bag, like not like a rifle case. I was doing a lot of stuff in and around civilians, in and around the general population in government rides, and I needed a covert amount of firepower. I settled on that Galil Ace, and I settled on it in 7.62x39 as opposed to the 5.56. Either one would have been okay, but I think, again, in this realm, for me, that caliber has more advantage than disadvantage. But these aren't the only two players on the field. There are plenty of other good intermediate caliber options for this. One that comes to mind is often forgotten is the VZ58. Light, handy, would be a great truck gun. And I've recorded an episode, but it hasn't come out yet because there's just been so much other stuff coming out. But on the SKS, a great all-around gun. If you're not just into the tactical, urban, suburban, I live in a cul-de-sac, but I'm ready to be Rambo. And there's nothing wrong with that. We should watch and be ready. But if you also hunt and you spend a lot of time in rural areas and you want a good balance of all-around carbine, I think the SKS is phenomenal. And not when you tactical Barbie it up. When you just leave it the way that it is. A good Narenko, a good Russian-made SKS. I'd leave out the Yugo. I'm not a big fan of those. Overly complicated. But a good Russian or Chinese SKS, the way that it's made, to be a good battlefield infantry rifle. Also a good hunting gun. I've said it before. When I grew up, they were kind of like the poor man's deer hunting rifle. Not because they're the best deer hunting rifle, but because they're affordable and they work. Again, that cartridge, it works. That gun, it works. It works the way that it's designed with 10-round stripper clips. If you learn how to reload a stripper clip, you can reload them pretty quickly. And not as good a battlefield weapon as an AK-47, but the AK-47 is not as good a hunting rifle as the SKS in regards to sights and barrel length and a bunch of other things. The way that they handle. So of a good all-around rifle and a good truck gun, the SKS, don't forget about it. Also a really good crossover. A really good crossover is in this realm. If you want to stay away from the tactical, because of the way it's perceived because of just your lifestyle, whatever it is, or you live in Canada, or you live in New York or New Jersey or somewhere like that, where maybe any of those more modern options are malum prohibitum, you may look at a lever action 30-30. I think 30-30 absolutely is an intermediate cartridge. I think it's America's first intermediate cartridge by a long shot. It's a great round. If you look at it ballistically, it's not the same because you're talking Spitzer bullet versus round nose bullets and things, but ballistically pretty comparable to 7.62x39. And a lot of the ammunition you're going to get for 30-30 is going to be good quality hunting ammo, which means it's going to be great on soft targets. 30-30, a lever action 30-30 has decent capacity. It doesn't have the rate of fire of a semi-auto, but it's got a lot higher rate of fire than a lot of other guns. And there's a lot of utility there for a truck gun. Just a good iron sight. Winchester 94 or Marlin 336. The Marlin 336 lends itself better to optics, so if you want to get a 336 and throw an LPVO on it or a red dot, there's nothing heretical in my opinion about that. A good lever action 30-30 is a good truck gun. Has been for a long time, continues to be so. Those are really good crossovers. Getting more into the tactical, let's not forget also the Mini 14. The Mini 14s are awesome. I use the Mini 14 in a professional context. I used them as a police officer. They were still in inventory. We had M16s. We had fully auto, like Car 15 M16 variants. I had access to all that and access to like full auto subguns. A lot of times I just grab the Mini 14. I like the way that it handles. I like the way that it shoots. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm going to tell you, full auto is almost useless in most military police contexts except for very, very niche applications. Full auto is, think that it's really cool, but from somebody that shot a lot of full auto and a lot of machine guns, it's not that cool. It's cool just for fun, but as far as actually effective, not super effective unless you're talking about a tripod or vehicle mounted belt fed system. You're talking about a shoulder fired system, honestly not super effective in most situations. Not when you're responsible and you are morally responsible for every round fired. Just on a battlefield where all the enemy is in the easterly direction and you can just shoot anything over there, right? That's generally not the context we find ourselves in a modern CONUS defensive context. So, anyway, went off on a little bit of a tangent there, but the Mini 14 is a great, handy little carbine. It's called the ranch rifle, right? Some of those variants, the ranch rifle. So if you live on a ranch, you're talking about a truck gun like that, that makes a lot of sense. And they also make the Mini 30. I think I've said before, I think the Mini 30, which fires 7.62 by 39, is perhaps one of the best all-around, like, bug-out guns. Apocalypse End of the World guns, you get one of those, you put an LPVO on it, because that's one of the big advantages to the AK. You can mount optics on AKs, you can mount optics on Galeals, but the solutions are not great. It's not nearly as rock solid. The Mini 14 comes with a good solid, I think they even come with scope rings. You can mount a good quality modern LPVO very easily. And I say do that. That's a great option. A Mini 30 or a Mini 14 with a good LPVO, that's a really, really good option. And it doesn't look nearly as bad guy-ish in our society as an AK-47. If you're talking about a Mini 30, you're talking about basically the same amount of firepower, pretty much the same kind of reload, same style of reload. The Rock and Lock magazine system. It's a good system. I'm a fan of the Mini 14. I'm a fan of the Mini 30. Mini 30 is a great gun, and it comes in stainless, which if you listen, you know I'm a big fan of stainless. So don't forget about the Mini 30 and the Mini 14. Awesome, awesome options. Also, one may be forgotten about, and I think I've realized this recently. Maybe some people don't trust Kel-Tec. And maybe I should do a whole Kel-Tec episode like, Kel-Tec's cool, but can you trust them or something like that. Now, to be fair, Kel-Tec does a lot of this to itself because they make just off-the-wall stuff like bullpup shotguns. First of all, why? Just why? But they really do a lot of kind of off-the-wall stuff, and I commend them for doing really cool, unique guns. However, they're a small company, and I don't think they get a lot of the R&D put into certain models before they release them. Some of their models aren't super reliable, like Bullpup Shotgun or the Kel-Tec PMR 30. However, some of their models are super reliable. Really good guns and really good values of guns, like the PF9, the P3AT. Those are good, reliable, affordable guns. The Kel-Tec Sub 2000, which I think we mentioned in the pistol caliber carbine episode. Super reliable, super affordable. They've been around a long time. They're a good, simple blowback, simple operation gun. They're affordable, they're reliable. There's nothing wrong with those models. And what brings us back to the intermediate cartridge, they have the SU-16. There's a bunch of letter designations that I'm not super familiar with. I have some experience, some first-hand experience with the Kel-Tecs. I never run those professionally, but I have run them and worked with them, and I think they're a good, reliable design. I don't think they get the credit they deserve. Going back to the folding thing, they don't have a buffer tube, unlike the AR, so you can shoot them with a stock folded. They go pretty small. Also, they're very light. They're much lighter than most. You can get super light ARs, but they're lighter than the average AR. If this is going to double as a bug-out bag gun, a bailout bag gun, a duffel bag gun, you might really look at the Keltec SU-16. It's also a piston system, which I don't like direct impingement. They work. You can get them to work. You can get really reliable ones, but they're not my favorite system. The Keltec is a piston system. And again, they're light, they're handy. You can mount good optics on them. You can fire them with the stock folded. There's a lot of advantage to the SU-16 in this kind of context. Are they going to have the sustained rate of fire of a SOCOM profile barrel Colt M4? No. But how many mags are you dumping through a Keltec SU-16? And if you're doing that, you're probably doing it because you want to break it. That's not what we're talking about here in a truck gun context, right? You're talking about convoy operations, which if you have listened to other episodes, I was a urban warfare instructor for the United States Marine Corps. I get all about convoy operations and things like that. But for you, truck gun is probably going to be to stop an active shooter or to break contact, escape an evasion. Out of a sticky situation, you're probably not doing mag dumps. If you want a gun to do mag dumps, then get an AK or an AR. But I think for a lot of practical reasons, the SU-16 or a Mini 14 or things like that are going to be just as good, and in some cases, maybe even better for what you're trying to do. Don't make the mistake, the Navy SEAL fallacy, I'll call it that, because a Navy SEAL runs a SIG 226 and I got to have a 226, and then I'll be a Navy SEAL. Doesn't work like that. It's like me saying Jimi Hendrix played a Fender Stratocaster, and I don't know what he played, right? I don't know guitars. I know the Fender Stratocaster. But if he did in fact play a Fender Stratocaster, the fact that he played it and made it sound really good doesn't mean that it's the best guitar for me. I might be better off with a Les Paul. And the fact that I get a Fender is not going to make me Jimi Hendrix, right? So don't fall into that with the guns like Navy SEALs use a SOCOM profile. Colt M4, so I gotta have that. And by proxy, I'll be a Navy SEAL. But you won't. And don't make the mistake of thinking that you're doing the same things a Navy SEAL is going to do, or a Marine Corps infantryman. This is bigger than this one episode, but what are you going to be doing with the gun? What is important to you? Is a folding stock and able to fit it under a seat important to you? Something Navy SEALs and Marine Corps infantrymen and private contractors and special assignments in law enforcement. One thing they have in common is they do look at mission parameters and mission-specific stuff, and if they have opportunity, they'll pick gear that is good for that mission. What's your mission, men? What are you trying to accomplish? And what's the best gun for that? Anyway, wrapping up intermediate caliber carbines. They're a really good balance of firepower and mobility. They're very prevalent today, so economy of scale, you get a lot of value there. You get decent capacity. Something I didn't mention, but I should have, you get decent range, like point blank range. The distance you can zero your rifle for and aim at the center of mass and expect to hit a target. It's a lot farther than any of the options we've discussed thus far, than a handgun, than a pistol caliber carbine. Also round per round more effective than options we've discussed so far, not than options we'll discuss in the future, but again, it's a good balance of firepower, mobility, capacity, economy of scale. The 5.56 and the 7.62x39 are both decent intermediate calibers. There are others. I mentioned the 30-30. There are other intermediate calibers. You may decide you're the 300 blackout guy or you're the 6.8 SPC guy, but all those intermediate cartridges, they have a lot in common. Good balance of firepower versus mobility, generally much higher velocity than handgun rounds, and there's a lot of advantage there. So there's a lot of advantage to these for a truck gun. Are they the right truck gun for you? Again, you do your own mission analysis. Gather your own intel. Where do you live? Do you live in rural Wyoming? Do you live in Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex? Live in Seattle, Washington? Do you live in Southern California? Do you live in the North Woods of Maine. You do your own kind of research. Do you live in Canada? Do you live in South Africa? Right, that changes things. By God's grace, I know we have listeners from all over. Italy. You do your own analysis. Mission, enemy, terrain. MET-TC, do your own analysis and figure out what's best for you. Is the intermediate carbine best for you, for your truck gun, your trunk gun? What kind of vehicle do you drive? That's another part of it that goes into your MET-TC. What's best for you? Maybe it's best for you just because you have the most experience with it. You're a vet of the global war on terror, and that's like the only rifle you've ever really had any real experience in training with. Honest with yourself, you're not going to go out and put hundreds of hours into another platform. So, yeah, that might be the best one just by default for you because it's what you're familiar with. Anyway, just some thoughts on the intermediate carbines for truck guns. With that, your tactical tip of the day. Tactical tip of the day. A tire repair kit. You might think, wait, we're supposed to be talking about tactical stuff. I'm getting ready for the end of the world, man. Well, it would really suck bugging out the end of the world and you got a flat tire. Absolutely practical, tactical. Tire repair kit and or a spare tire and or a way to inflate a tire. Right. I think that's a manly skill that you should know. Everybody, absolutely. I think every man considers himself a warrior should know how to shoot and run a gun, handgun, rifle, shotgun. I agree with that. I also agree you should know how to change a freaking tire and patch a tire. That's also really important. Talking about truck guns or trunk guns, have a spare tire, know how to change a tire, know how to patch a tire. Hopefully your car has a spare tire, but even if it does, sometimes it's safer, just depending on the side of the road and the environment, to just patch it real quick. A tire repair kit is not that expensive. Fix a flat to reinflate it is not that expensive. Also, little emergency air compressors you can plug into the outlet in your car and slowly inflate a tire. Those things can come in really handy. I've used all those things before. They come in really handy. Don't just think about, I got my carbine, I got my bailout bag, and got my gas mask, but you have no way to plug a flat tire. I would say your priorities probably need adjusting. Because even in really bad times, you can still get a flat tire, and that might really hurt you. Anyway, tactical tip of the day out of the way. Tactical verse of the day. I was reading this morning in Matthew, and very fitting for today's episode. Watch therefore, for you do not know what hour the Lord is coming. And again, therefore you also be ready, for the Son of Man is coming at an hour you do not expect. Watch therefore, for you know neither the day nor the hour in which the Son of Man is coming. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed day.